Hello students, today we would revise a poem and the name of the poem is A Tiger in the Zoo by Leslie Norris. Leslie Norris is a French poet and short story writer. In this poem, Leslie brings out the contrast a tiger which is in the zoo with the tiger in its natural habitat. The poem moves from the zoo to the jungle and back again to the zoo. So, if we have visited a zoo, we must have noticed the different animals, the different wild animals that are kept in the zoo. What is common among all these animals? I, for one, when I visited the zoo, one thing which I noticed among all the animals in the zoo, that these animals are not very active. Here there's a deer's park in Nagpur. The deers are so lethargic, so lazy. They tend to stand under the shade of a tree, grazing whatever is there. The peacocks are not active. The peahens are not active. Even the tiger and the leopard, I have noticed them lying lazily. This is not the real life of these animals. These animals seem to be so unhappy, and it's but natural. If we are put behind the bars, wouldn't we feel unhappy, lethargic, lazy, not wanting to do things, at times very angry, frustrated? All these things which we experience or which we would experience, the animals too experiences the same thing. Why are these animals kept in the zoo? Perhaps for exhibition, perhaps for people to have a closer look to all these wild animals. But sometimes the carnivorous animals are kept because they become a problem to the human society, especially the ones who are living very close to the jungles. These animals, like the tigers and the leopards, at times become man eaters, or at times they become animal lifters. They will lift the calves and the cows and the buffaloes from the villages. They start eating animals and humans which are actually not their natural prey. But again, who is to blame? Who is to be blamed here? Are we not infringing into the forest? Are we not expanding our territories? Isn't the jungle shrinking? Then what would the tiger do? The tiger, who is a ferocious animal, will naturally make the human feel his presence, will naturally terrorize the village folks who venture deep into the forest, maybe to collect certain produces from the forest, maybe to graze the animals for forage, so forth and so on. So here The poet Leslie Norris brings out a compassionate view of the forest. He shows empathy towards tiger, the tiger which represents the Indian forest. So let's try to understand the poem line by line, para by para, as we read through. A tiger in the zoo. He stalks in his vivid stripes the few steps of his cage on pads of velvet quiet in his quiet rage. He should be lurking in shadow, sliding through long grass near the water hole where plump deer pass. He should be snarling around houses at the jungle's edge, baring his white fangs, his claws, terrorizing the village. But he is locked in a concrete cell, his strength behind bars, stalking the length of his cage, ignoring visitors. He hears the last voice at night, the patrolling cars, and stares with his brilliant eyes at the brilliant stars. He stalks he stalks in his vivid stripes. When the poet refers the tiger as he, the poet is personifying the tiger. The poet is using the figure of speech personification. Throughout the poem, we see that the poet is referring to the tiger as he, as his. So he is giving a human touch. The poet is trying to draw out empathy towards the tiger. The poet is trying to connect the tiger with we human beings. He says he stalks in his vivid stripes. Stalks. What does a tiger do when he is hungry for prey? The word stalks refers to the silent movement of the tiger when he is looking out for his prey, when he is trying to hunt down perhaps a deer or some other grass eating animal. So he walks silently without making any noise. So the word stalks means to walk silently. Here the tiger, instead of stalking a deer, instead of looking out for prey, the poor tiger is walking up and down in his cage. He stalks in his vivid stripes. In his vivid stripes, bright colored stripes. The coat of the tiger is a golden yellow with black stripes. Yet the poet describes the stripes as vivid, as bright. He stalks in his vivid stripes the few steps of his cage. You know that a tiger has its territory in the jungle. Generally, a male tiger has a territory of 200 square kilometers. 200 kilometers as a radius, as his territory. But here he is bound in a small cage and he can take only a few steps on pads of velvet quiet. Pads are the soft under portion of the paws. The tiger has those soft velvety paws. That is why the poet is referring to the paws of the tiger as pads of velvet quiet. So the figure of speech here is a metaphor. The poet is using a metaphor to describe the tiger's paw. Though the tiger can move without making a sound on these soft padded paws, the tiger's paw is very strong. Yet the tiger here in the zoo, in his cage, is walking on this rough surface, on this hard surface with his velvety paws, and the tiger doesn't make any sound. He stalks in his vivid stripes the few steps of his cage on pads of velvet quiet in his quiet rage. The tiger is full of anger. The tiger is full of anger. At the same time, he is quiet. He is trying to control his anger. The figure of speech used here is oxymoron, because two opposite meaning words are used in the same line. In fact, they are used simultaneously: quiet and rage. Rage is anger. When you're angry, you make a loud noise. You start throwing things around. You start breaking things, shouting. But here, the tiger is described as in his quiet rage. He is trying to control his anger, and that is how the poet describes the tiger in his first stanza, the tiger in the zoo. Then in the next stanza, the poet shifts to the jungle. He tells us where the tiger should be. He says he should be lurking in shadow, sliding through long grass near the water hole where plump deer pass. He should be lurking in shadow. Again, see the same figure of speech personification. He should be lurking in shadow. Lurking in shadow means he should be hiding in the shadows of the grass. If you see the color of the tiger is golden yellow, bright golden yellow with dark stripes, with black stripes. This color of the tiger helps him to camouflage himself in the grass, because when the wind blows, the grass moves, the shade of the grass seems to be shifting from one place to the other, and this in fact helps the tiger to camouflage itself in the movement of the golden grass. He should be lurking in shadow, sliding through long grass. The movement of the tiger, sliding, quietly sliding on his fours, maybe resting on his belly and gently sliding through the grass near the water hole. What is a water hole? The water hole is a source of drinking water. It may be a lake or a pond or a stream passing in the river, a stream passing in the jungle. So some sort of a source of water where all the animals of the jungle, they come to quench their thirst. So that is a natural haunt of the tiger. The tiger knows that he can get its prey over here. And what is the tiger's favorite prey? Plump deers, fat deers, where plump deer pass. He should be snarling around houses at the jungle's edge, baring his white fangs, his claws, terrorizing the village. So what should the tiger actually be doing? When he says he should be, that means he's referring to a place which he is not in. Right now, where is the tiger? The tiger is in the zoo. The tiger is in the cage in a zoo. And where should the tiger be? He should be somewhere around the ferry of the jungle, where the peoples have encroached upon the people the people should not be near a jungle, and they come and build their settlements there. So naturally the tiger wants to show his presence. So what does he do? He visits the village. He visits this village and he shows his white fangs, the big front teeth, the pointed teeth of the tiger are its fangs. It will project its fang, it will threaten the villagers, perhaps in a hope that the villagers would leave this place and move off somewhere closer to the cities, and leave the jungle to the jungle folk like the tigers, the leopards, the bears, and the other grass eating animals too. So he comes and terrorizes the village which are at the ferry at the edge of the jungle. He should be snarling around, growling, a sort of a growling sound. He is not roaring right now. He makes a snarl of a sound. A snarl. He's not roaring. He's actually making this short grunting sound, which is called as a snarl. That is to make the people aware of his presence. He purposely makes a noise near the settlements, near the huts. He should be snarling around houses at the jungle's edge, baring his white fangs, his claws, terrorizing the village. The tiger is terrorizing the village. Why does the poet say that the tiger should be doing this? Because the poet wants to put stress that we humans are encroaching into the natural habitat of the tiger. We are where we should not be. If a tiger kills a man in the jungle, whose fault is it? If a train runs over a person crossing the railway at a place where he should not be crossing the railway tracks, if a person is on the railway tracks and the railway train comes and kills that person, cuts the person into two, whose fault is it? Is it the engine driver's fault, or is it the person who's crossing the railway tracks at the wrong time, at the wrong place? In the same way, like it is the person who's crossing the tracks at the wrong time, at the wrong place, it is his fault and not the engine driver's fault. So also, when a tiger kills a man in the jungle or near a jungle, it is not the fault of a tiger. It is the fault of the human being for being there, because the jungle is meant for the jungle folks, and we are supposed to be civilized people. We are supposed to live in the luxuries of the villages, in the luxuries of the cities. So therefore the poet says that the tiger should be terrorizing the villages where at the ferry, at the boundaries, at the edges of the dense forest, because it is these villagers who go deep into the forest to collect wood, to collect leaves, to collect fruits, figs, roots and bulbs, and in a way they destroy the forest. But he is locked in a concrete cell. Who is the he here? Again, it is the tiger. So in every stanza, the poet is personifying the tiger. But he is locked in a concrete cell, his strength behind bars, stalking the length of his cage, ignoring visitors. But he is locked in a concrete cell. The cell is made of concrete, cement, iron, stones. So the tiger is a very powerful animal, but his strength is of no use as long as he is behind bars. Many of us, when we go to the zoo, when we see a tiger in the zoo, we are fearless. We stand fearlessly in front of one of the most ferocious animals in the world. We might be just a few meters from the tiger, The tiger may be, say, just 10 feet from you, stalking in his cage. Had this been an open jungle, the situation would be totally and entirely different. We would not stand so bravely, perhaps we would not be so bold, so courageous in front of this ferocious beast. But what can the tiger do? With all his strength, he still cannot come out of the cage, come out of the concrete cell. The concrete cell here is a small, of course, you all know what is a concrete cell, a small room. And all the strength that the tiger has is behind the bars. He cannot show his strength because you are in a safe place. The tiger is kept enclosed in an enclosure. And what does he do then? He just stalks the length of his cage. He just walks up and down the length of his cage and ignores the visitors. He knows he cannot do anything to you all. It is best to ignore you all. He is very wild, he is very angry, but yet he controls his anger, for he knows that if he attacks the cage, it is he who is going to get hurt and not us. So the best thing the tiger feels to do is to ignore the presence of we humans. He hears the last voice at night, the patrolling cars, and stares at the brilliant eyes, at the brilliant stars. So the tiger, even at night time, before he goes off to sleep, what is the sound that he hears? He hears the sound of the patrolling cars. The cars are doing the patrol duty just to see that all the visitors have left the zoo, just to see that all the cages are securely locked. And the poet says, and stares with brilliant eyes at the brilliant stars. The cat's eye, the tiger's eye, they reflect light. Any source of light is reflected by the cat's eye or the eyes of a tiger. So the tiger, perhaps the patrolling cars, they flashlights, they headlights of the cars, they flash on the face of the tiger, and in the night the eyes reflect these light in a bright way. That is the meaning of the bright eyes, brilliant eyes. And yes, even in the daytime, the cats have very beautiful eyes, very brilliant eyes, very bright eyes. The tiger has a brilliant eye. So there are two meanings of the brilliant eye. One is the natural beauty that the tiger, that the eyes of the tiger reflect, and the second is the reflection of the light by the source of maybe the torch light or the source of the light of the patrolling cars. The tiger's eyes act as a reflector and reflect these light brightly. He hears the last voice at night, the patrolling cars, and stares with his brilliant eyes at the brilliant stars. So the figure of speech used in this poem is personification, alliteration, oxymoron, assonance. Of course, you all know what is assonance. Assonance is the repetition of the vowel sound. For example, in the very first line, when the poet says he stalks in his vivid stripes, so the vowel sound of I is being repeated in and his and vivid. You can see the alphabet I. The alphabet I may be placed anywhere. It may be placed in the beginning of a letter. It might be placed in the middle of the letter. It may be placed at the end of the letter. And apart from assonance, In the very first line, we have another figure of speech personification, because the tiger has been personified as he. Generally, we call an animal by the uh, pronoun it, using it for an animal, but here the poet uses he for the tiger. So he is personifying the tiger. And another figure of speech is alliteration. The sounds of S has been repeated when we say stocks and stripes. So a number of figure of speech is used here in the poem. uh, Oxymoron, as I told you, is when the poet says in his quiet rage, that is another figure of speech. Another significant figure of speech is metoximy. Metoximy is a figure of speech where a quality of that person or thing is represented by a word. So in the second last stanza, in the second line, the poet says his strength behind bars. This is a metoxiny, metoxymy, metoxymy, because the strength is referring to the ability of the tiger, what all the tiger could do. But the tiger is still behind the bars. So there are a number of figure of speech used in the poem, throughout the poem. And when we talk about the theme of the poem is freedom for one and all. It is the poet wants to bring out the empathy, the feeling of oneness with the tiger. When he refers to the tiger as a person, he is trying to draw out the similarity between you and any other wildebeest, any other wild animal, any other wild beast. Here he has taken an example of a tiger, such a strong and powerful animal. He finds himself helpless behind bars. He finds himself lethargic, freedomless, where he doesn't even have enough space to move around. So freedom for one and all is the theme of the poem. Let animals live in their natural habitats. The tiger should be lurking somewhere near a water hole. The tiger should be resting under the shade of a tree, in the jungle, in the forest. That is the main theme of the poem. The poet has intentionally drawn a contrast of a tiger in the jungle and the tiger in a zoo. What does a tiger do in a jungle? He is so active, he is so skillful. It is his right to kill the deer and eat it. In a way, the tiger maintains the ecological balance of the jungle. If there is no tiger in the jungle would be very soon destroyed, not only by man but also by the animals. The herbivores would eat up all the tender shoots, the saplings of the trees, the grass. So to maintain an ecological balance, the tiger needs to be there in the jungle. The tiger maintains an ecological balance by killing plump deers, fat deers, to eat it. What is the law? What is the law of the jungle? The law of the jungle is fittest survive. Survival of the fittest. And that is what the poet is trying to draw contrast. The tiger, who is so active in the jungle, is seen so lethargic, so lazy in the zoo, behind the concrete walls of the zoo. So all in all, the poem is a good read. Read the poem silently once, and you can say which stanza are speaking about the tiger in the zoo and which one are speaking about the tiger in the jungle. So I hope that I have made the poem clear to you all. For whatever doubts you have, you can always ask me in the chat section of our app. So this is Tyrone signing off for today.